Morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for the response. It's a cold morning here, very unlikely for Singapore. My name is 𝐄𝐝𝐢𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐧. I'm from the London Institute of Banking and Finance. We are a banking institute for the last 143 years in the UK. We started our operations in APAC in 2019. We have 3 centers of excellence, and one of it is in digital banking and finance. And that's how we are associated with Exito for some of the conferences that they run in APAC as well as in MENA. A bit about myself, I came from a IT telco background. In fact, started off with telco, and then I did some IT security distributions, and after that I moved on to executive training. And that's how I got into the training institute, providing training to bankers mainly. So a lot of my experience in the digital transformation IT world has been with the CIO or the data scientists of today's within the financial sector. So it's interesting that I asked to moderate this panel where it consists more of a pharmaceutical industry, something that is generally quite distant from me, but I've been reading up a little bit more. So, but I would do the introductions, I guess, leave the introductions to my panelists here. So if I may, Ramya, if you could introduce yourself, the company that you work for, that would be really, really good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ang. Hello, everyone. Good morning once again. I'm Ramya. I head the business technology on a commercial part for Asia. I work for Abbvie. Throughout my experience, most of the career options that I chose are within pharma. And the reason that I would want to stick to is the patients that we serve and the impact that you make to the society as well. I worked a couple of years with Google as well on setting up the process for YouTube, but primarily all through my experience, I've been supporting pharma industries across the regions, primarily on to commercial IT standpoint. And I'm glad to have been part of this discussion here to share the thoughts along with other panel members and also to look through your ideas and furthermore discussions during the breaks. Thank you so much.
Miguel?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I'm also working in healthcare. Same building, actually, right? It's Abbvie, one level above Abbvie. So, and my current role is called Customer Engagement and Experience, which is very, very connected to digital transformation. I would say as part of the journey that we've been at Novartis in the past, let's say 5 years, my previous role was exclusively dedicated to business transformation, and it was a bit less focused on the technology side. I had my counterpart as a very similar role to yours, Ramya, but my role was more around people, the business model, the mindset, the culture, and through that. Trying to be a more customer-centric company, we came up with this new function that I am leading now, which is all about trying to bring value and satisfaction to our customers, whether it's doctors or patients, very oftenly fueled by digital technologies. Happy to be here.
Daniel?
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm not from the pharma industry. I'm actually from Digital Realty, so part of my role in terms of speaking with various different customers about their digital transformation journey, and maybe we'll cover a little bit about how a company like Digital Realty that operates a lot of data centers around the world actually helps in that digital transformation journey, where some of them some customers have taken a data center centric approach into be able to, help improve a lot of things that they've been trying to do. So my background has always been in technology, and maybe about 2014, I dabbled into the data center side of the business, and I think there's a lot of interesting lessons to be learned, and hopefully we'll find it very useful as I share them.
Thank you. Thank you, Miguel, Daniel, as well as Ramya. I came from an MPLS background as well, so a little bit on the cloud as well and stuff like this. But very, very different now. It's a new brand new world. I just wanted to pull the workshop or these panel topics to my panelist background here. The title here is CDO Dilemma. I think CDO is a really old title in current world. I think we have moved on to Chief Data Analytics Officer. Recently, I've seen a Chief Data AI Officer. And I think this role sort of evolved from 2018, 2009, and 2008, where, after the financial crisis, the banks, that's what I'm familiar with, started to have these CDO job titles to look into mainly standards and data governance, very much about risk management. And I think the second generations of a sort of CDO job nature moved towards data lakes, centralized data. And right now, what we are seeing here is the data people or the IT officers who are looking after data are being, motivated by the stakeholders to look into delivering business value to the business. So the CDO job was established many, many years ago by big banks, and now it has changed quite a fair bit. It's very much about customer engagement, customer experience. So if I may, to put towards a questions to my panelists here, as digital leaders face the dilemma of reimagining the playing field, what are the key considerations and challenges they encounter in harnessing the power of data to drive digital transformations? If I can have all my panelists to chip in a little bit on this area, starting with the lady.
Oh, great, thank you. So primarily, I think also to add on to what the earlier speakers mentioned, so data is definitely one of the topics that we would want to improve on as an organization, because I think we do see data everywhere, but then we might not always take insights from the data for the next best actions as well. So whether you're talking to your patients or to be able to reach your customers better, the doctors better, especially in the pharma industry. So I think this is something that we are also looking into, having all the data talking to each other, where we get some real-time insights out of it in time, where you can use that for next conversations that you might have with your customers. So that's definitely something that we're looking at as well.
Miguel?
Yeah, so I think, as you were saying, to me, the most important part of the evolution of the CDO role, which kind of comes and goes, right, in organizations, because it becomes like sometimes a bit more specific towards data, towards customer centricity, etc. In my opinion, it should always start about, think about the customer, right? And many times, and I think it was also on one of the keynote addresses, I think the biggest change in digital transformations is stop thinking about your products and start thinking about the customer, right? Many times an organization thinks, oh, let's do this with the data, right? Let's build this dashboard, let's do this next best action engine, etc. Where maybe the customer wants something different, right? Yeah. And inevitably, when you start, just thinking about the customer first and how do we transform ourselves to better serve these customers, you end up dealing with data. It's a given, right? But how you deal with this data or what data products you create or what you prioritize tends to change a lot, right? So in my opinion, more and more, it's more about asking the customer or being very close to the customer and then working backwards with your data to serve that purpose.
Daniel?
Yeah, sure. I mean, coming from my perspective, it's about from our company, what we did was, we've got quite a few thousand customers, and we did a little bit of a survey, and we asked that question as well to our customers. And I think the overall feedback is that about 87, percent of customers are saying that going forward, they really need to have a data-first strategy about how they were going to be able to get meaningful outputs and insights to what they've collected. And also another thing is that, no surprise that one of the survey results that we got back was that a lot of this data still resides on their own infrastructure, but then more and more they are seeing that they're also consuming content or services that are outside of their domain. So there's a lot of that hybrid IT concept that they still need to figure out. So from the MPLS, or whether you're talking to your favorite network provider or whatever to get interconnected, or is everything still in-house? And I think they're still grappling with that. So a couple of themes that came out from that was also about where their users are, locations, where they're trying to reach new markets. And that's where they said that they need a data-first strategy as well. So that's something that's in their 4-year roadmap, 5-year roadmap, but everybody's still trying to figure it out, I would say.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Daniel. I think maybe 20 years ago, a lot of the data is all about internal, so you work with the internal stakeholders. But with the digital transformations and what has happened over the past 3 to 4 years, companies begin to take in data from external stakeholders. And that's where it drives that digital transformation and the complexity of managing data. So if I can ask follow-up questions to my 2 panelists from the pharmaceutical industry, in terms of stakeholder management for data, what are the challenges that you do face working within the industry that you're in, and also how do you overcome some of this and make it opportunities to discuss business value?
Yeah, so I think primarily there are 2 components to it as well, Ang. So firstly, to understand the customer, right, like Miguel mentioned, right? So I think with COVID as well, everyone accelerated on digital. So we've sent a lot of new information to the doctors, or old information through different new platforms. So there's definitely this concept of driving digital fatigue over to doctors, because every pharma company wanted to accelerate on digital to be able to reach when there was no access to face-to-face, right? So I think that's one key component, but where we're looking at is to see what would be the preferences of the doctors itself. So we're not only looking at what are the channel preferences, or which channels the doctor wants to be reached out through, but also the frequency by which they would want over across different channels. So that's one of the key components that we're looking at. So if you're talking about the stakeholders, of course there is, so I do have a counterpart like Miguel mentioned, so we do have a CX counterpart, and primarily I work very closely together with my CX. Sometimes you might have a business case that you'd want to develop to a solution, or sometimes the stakeholders might not always know what the business case is as well. So we work very closely together. If you have a new solution which you think might make a right impact for the organization, then that's when we try and capture some data, look through the background, and see how we can make that difference with the new solution. So primarily, yeah, working very closely with the stakeholders from this aspect really helps.
Thank you, Miguel.
So I think there's a lot of factors that are very similar to most highly regulated industries, like finance, where you might have your business case, your use case, which can be super innovative, very well intended, but it touches on data privacy, on patient information, or it touches on some internal compliance regulations or some industry regulations. So you end up, being kind of disappointed many times about what you can actually do with the data. So you end up, I think, over time when you're in these roles, you end up understanding that the stakeholder management, depending on the project, can be equally or even more important than the project itself, right? So sometimes you have to kind of pre-align all stakeholders to say, okay, let's build a use case together, right? And let's see what we can actually do, and switch from no, you can't, to okay, how can we then do this or do that, right? And that also creates a bit of a snowball effect, because then everybody feels a bit more ownership, gets excited, the budget might come in easier, etc. And then, you know, afterwards the results and what I was saying about, you know, trying to serve the customer as better as you can tends to happen, right? Versus, you know, starting from, oh, I have this idea, I'm gonna kind of try to push it forward, tends not to work so much. Yeah.
So I'm hearing like agility in a project
Very
is really
much.
important.
Yeah.
Ownership, not just within, you know, your team. It has to involve a few other business as well, internal stakeholders as well. I think in that area, what Daniel provides.
Maybe I can add a point to that, right? So one of the things that, you know, so part of my role, I tend to speak to certain customers more regularly than others. Apologies, but there's some customers we talk to more regularly than others. And what we generally do is that even for us, being the third party, you can also see there's so many folks that we need to speak to drive towards one direction, and that is clear. And sometimes you would think that internally everybody's aligned, but I'm sure it's usually not the case. In my experience, it's always, you know, everybody's trying to improve their own little domain, but nobody's, you know, it's not an orchestra, so to speak. So we do have that regular cadence with some customers, and we try to cajole them into a particular direction. But it is true. It is very hard.
I'd like to follow up, Daniel. So in terms of your solutions or your services to your clients, it's very much about infrastructure, data centers, cloud migration.
Right.
Yeah. How do you manage that conversations as you have described?
Very, very delicately. So usually what we do is that what are your end objectives? Where do you want to see and end up? Because we usually typically do say that, you know, it's a journey. Definitely there is no destination, right? It's a journey. So you want to find out what's everybody's clear objective, and then try to unify everybody as much as possible. For some people, the CFO is looking at cost reduction. The IT guy wants the best and greatest and fanciest thing. But, you know, and then the guys who are the bean counters are saying, how does this improve my overall end user experience or the customer experience? So everybody's got different things in play. So usually we try to line it up as best as we can.
Do the questions on hybrid and on-premise cloud comes out in your conversations? How do you address the challenges and opportunities and making things very agile, for your clients' team?
Yeah, I can address that. I think it's every day. It's a common question. We've got customers that talk about, by 20, okay, I'm using an old date. By 2020, 50% of my compute workload must be in the cloud. They're still in our data centers. They're still buying compute. So they just they maybe have repatriated back some of their data, but it's an ideal. But obviously, at the end of the day, it's a very common issue that we see. Some customers they want a hybrid IT environment, and actually there are benefits to doing it, but it is about that agility that actually is what everybody's after. And then if costs changes and it makes sense, then clearly you choose whatever is most suitable.
Ramla, Miguel, do you have anything to add to hybrid cloud, on-premise? Is that part of the conversation that you have with your other stakeholders as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think with the ever-changing environment as well, I think this would definitely be one of the key topics. But yeah, I think like Daniel mentioned, I think primarily it's about having the right ownership and also having a clear path on where we are steering towards as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, I think fundamentally it's about changing how you think about technology. So to give an example, as Daniel was speaking, I was thinking that we did this big global project on a data lake, right? It's not about cloud or on-prem, but
We
switching
love to hear stories. Please elaborate.
So
Yeah.
it was moving a lot of data into a single data lake, etc. And we're almost done with it, but now data mesh comes up, right? And then so all of a sudden people start thinking, oh no, we need to now invest in this and move into that, and it feels like a never-ending story sometimes, right? So trying to build that agility and trying to find those partners who can give you that agility to say, sometimes I need this data on premise, sometimes I need this data on the cloud, and then on the cloud in certain countries because there's legislations and whatnot. If you can find that way of working, that's actually, and I'm not saying we're there, by means we're not, but that's actually to me the ideal state, right? Where you can be very flexible and very agile towards moving from one place to another and kind of get rid of this old mentality of, oh, everything needs to be here, everything needs to be there, because that's not how things are going to work, I think, in the future.
Miguel, earlier you also mentioned about data privacy, and obviously this also comes into data security, right? How can organizations effectively address the challenges, given that all different stakeholders are asking for different things? Some want it to be centralized. Many years ago, data lake was the cool thing to do, and now it's decentralized, cloud on premises, and all that stuff. How do organizations address this effectively, the challenges within this new playing field that we are in, which is all about the customers, is all customer centric?
I have an unpopular opinion on that.
I like unpopular opinions.
So I think unless you're a company that is truly dedicated to data security and IT security, it's very hard to try to manage that in-house. So where I'm coming is, companies tend to have your policies, your procedures around data privacy, security policies, etc., which is fine, right? But they're usually outdated. It's very common because by the time, like I was saying, by the time you finish aligning this global operating procedure, whatnot, something new has come up, right? And you're trying to kind of retrofit things then all of a sudden, and typically what's ends up happening whenever there are leaks, error, mistakes, whatever, it's due to human error, right? It's not the technology that's failing. It's somebody who fell for a phishing scam or clicked something where they shouldn't, etc., right? So in my opinion, you should bring the experts in to partner with you and basically manage security, privacy, etc., in the best way possible, in a constant and ever-changing way, because it never stops, and kind of delegate that to them, because it's not, at least for us, it's not the core of our business, right? We're in the healthcare business, and then just focus on making sure that your people are trained or knowledgeable enough to not make those mistakes around privacy or security.
Ramla, you have anything to?
No, I'm good.
Unpopular opinion. Okay, I'll come out with unpopular opinion. So being a maybe let's just talk about digital realty IT, right? So one thing about data security that our chief information security officer did was that that was really unpopular within the company, but he did it because there were a lot of cybersecurity attacks on our data. And it was he had a lot of reports that basically said there were all these bad hat hackers trying to hack. So in our company, what we have done is we implemented something really, really quite radical is that we are told to re-authenticate every day, sometimes maybe twice a day. So there's a lot of
Same here for me.
a lot of inconvenience that there's actually being done, but it is the nature of the world today. There are a lot of companies being held with ransomware. I had a customer that had to be down because they were attacked by ransomware, and they had to reconstitute all their data based on backup. So the reality is there's stuff going on. And sometimes the additional security of the data actually is very, very important. And that's something that you have to consider.
On this, I'd like to hear whether from the floor there's any questions. Yeah, the gentleman over there. Can someone pass him a mic, please?
Anybody?
Manage.
Front row. Yeah.
Yeah, so my question is related to, we are entering the age of AI now. So is there any kind of, I want to see your views, or I want to know whether you have any initiatives or anything related to using generative AI in any of the businesses that you...
Yeah, actually, we will come to the AI and ChatGPT and how that is going to attack and as well as, manage all this thing. But I think Daniel would have something to...
Yeah, so maybe, we speak with a lot of customers. They're a little bit more, forecasting what stuff they want to do in the next few years. So we're seeing, how should I put it? There are some service providers out there that live in our data center that will offer it as a service. But I think one of the big challenges is the data that they are trying to use to get meaningful outputs, right? Because right now, everything that ChatGPT does or Google Bard does is public domain. But you want, if for an enterprise, you want it to be able to scroll the information that's in your data lakes, right? And you want to give you information that makes sense for you. Now, that data is proprietary to you. How are you going to securely, get this generative AI platform to consume it and give you a meaningful reply? And that amount, petabytes or terabytes of data or whatever, is going to be very hard to manage. So it has to be, ideally, in one place, right? And we have customers that have been building big farms, right? So you see people from finance, you see people from automakers, self-driving. So these are the few examples that everybody's going forward with. And one thing that I've also learned is that buying the state-of-the-art GPU cluster doesn't make your company AI. So you still need to do a lot of work. So things to be...
A lot of software and a lot on the people.
A lot of software and SI services, PS services that need to come in to customize it to your company. And I think that's the holy grail for enterprise companies to build their own.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of initiatives now on the open source as well as on the Microsoft side, basically, where you use this kind of technologies like Azure OpenAI. You get to analyze your data using GPT-4 kind of technologies, basically on internal company data. So I think this is huge, and basically I think like in our company, basically we see a lot of applications. We are from IHI basically, so in our whole group we see a need for unstructured data to be analyzed using this kind of generative AI technologies. So yeah.
Yeah, so as you said, it's as a service. So it's about how do you scroll that data, and yeah. So it's all about that. In digital realty, we like to say this thing called data gravity, which is about the penalty of having your data in one place and how hard is it to distribute it across. So that's something that needs to be figured out. So that's the things that I usually discuss with our customers about how do you manage the transportation of all this information that you want to be able to analyze. So things like that, probably too big a topic for today. Yeah.
But since now we are on the AI and new technology, I guess I could ask Miguel and Ramya, from your role, how do you make use of this newer technology that's coming in terms of customer engagement, in terms of managing your stakeholders? Does this create more opportunities or it create more frictions for you?
Yeah, so I think primarily, I think this topic is also a bit finicky in the pharma industry. I think primarily because we have a lot of regulatory, requirements as well, the rules that we need to abide through. But definitely we do see, a lot of improvement in efficiency standpoint if we're using AI. So like Daniel mentioned, we're also looking at something that we build in private. So we do have a lot of content preparation for some of our marketing and medical teams. We do have a lot of translation services considering Asia is pretty diverse. So I think using OpenAI would really help fasten all these aspects, save an immense amount of cost as well. But we want to also look at what is the data that we're feeding into versus what are the outputs that we're getting as well. So this is definitely something that we're exploring, but not, also to hold that data private within the company rather than, just putting in the brand plan information or anything out to the public. So that's definitely something that we're looking at. But I think it's still pretty early. We do have our teams using it, but we do tell them to use it cautiously while they input some of the data in here.
Yeah, I think it's very similar for us, right? I would say, I think most companies, especially when you're regulated, we're in a stage where you have to get into this, right? If you don't, you're basically losing a competitive edge in the next 3 years, right? And how I see this playing out, like in the short term, and where we are focusing at the moment is on use cases that leverage internal data that is not confidential, right? Because that's a kind of safe first step towards. So we have a case specifically on kind of analyzing unstructured data out of surveys, for example, of open text surveys, and kind of getting a concise summary or trying to kind of derive insights out of that. A bit of content generation as well for right now for internal purposes, and that kind of leverage helps build the expertise and the trust and confidence, especially again on other stakeholders like legal, etc. So then you can go into a little bit more ambitious steps.
Thank you. I have about 30 minutes left. I'm going to cover two other aspects. One is on partnerships with all the other stakeholders as well as startups in implementing technology for customer engagement. And we also mentioned earlier about talent within the customer engagement as well as data team. So if I may ask, collaboration and partnerships play a vital role in digital transformation. So how can organizations foster this with technology provider, startup and industries to accelerate this initiative and drives innovation?
That's for me? Okay. Well, yeah. So I think a collaboration is definitely a key for us to work through any of the initiatives. So what we do is we do work very closely from the start. So everyone is involved in the process. So at a later point in time, to Daniel's example, where you do not really have difference in directions. So another aspect that the earlier speaker, Sunil, mentioned is, the teams do steer in different directions, be it CX or IT or the key stakeholders from marketing and medical primarily. I think what's important is to have that collaboration just to ensure that there might be a little of variances from the respective departments and the expertise that they have, but primarily steering into one direction, I think, is what is the key here. To understand what is the background of what we're trying to fill the gaps of, I think that would also be pretty a key aspect.
So from my point of view, I think it starts first by defining if you're really looking for a partner or a vendor, and understanding that it's not the same thing, right? Usually when you're dealing with a vendor, you set the conditions because you know what you're looking for, right? And you have a list of choices and you choose one and you kind of tell them what to do, right? But that's less and less happening, I think, today, right? Because many times you sort of have a need, but you don't exactly know what the solution would look like, right? So that's when you need a partner, right? And so in that kind of partnership spectrum, I think you can have those where there's established technologies where you can leverage on their expertise and then bring them in to help you. But then there's others, as you were saying, like startups where actually you kind of need to be a complement, right? Where they are building something or they have something that you internally you definitely cannot build or cannot find anywhere else. But you're also bringing something else to the table rather than just money because you're paying them, right? You're bringing a certain degree of expertise that can help them develop, etc. Because that type of partnership tends to be way more intense, and you need to kind of develop together with these companies as compared to more established companies. So we have a simple framework to kind of deal with different spectrums of partnerships or vendors depending on the use case. Yeah.
The maturity of the solutions and the technology.
And
Yeah.
not just the maturity of the technology and the solution, but also the clarity of the need that you have internally, right? Because sometimes we have an idea, honestly. Sometimes we say, well, we would like to get patients diagnosed faster for a certain disease. Very common. We want to help healthcare systems diagnose this disease, which is pretty rare or which is not very easy to diagnose or very expensive to diagnose. We want to find an easier way to do it. There's tens of ways to do that sometimes, right? So it's not just about the technology, it's also about your own idea, right? Versus, I need something very specific that I know that I need. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add on.
Partner with your clients.
Fail fast. Evaluate very quickly, right? Try everything, right? Honestly, so find two kinds of companies to help you. One, like you say, is a partner or an agent will help you recommend certain technologies. Have that organization in your company to evaluate very quickly, because you don't want to be spending a lot of time on something that is not going to work. Because I think there's a tendency for certain customers to go, it cannot fail. We have to do this, and if it takes 24 months to figure it out, we're just going to go through 24 months, even though you figured out it's not going to work in the first 6 months. So you have to fail. You have that mentality of being able to find new technologies, try very quickly, evaluate. If it works, use it. If it doesn't work, move on. And I think that's the hardest thing to do in a large organization, but that's the ideal.
We do have some of the localizations that we would want to try, and so usually the whole of the IT team together with CX team, we do partner very closely just to look through some of the vendor solutions as well, because sometimes it's more solution driven, because where you do not know, there could be a potential gap in understanding the customer or serving the customer. So I think that would really be a crucial aspect to start off. And yeah, failing quick. I think that would also give us insights. At least you've tried that, you know why it doesn't work. If you want to repick it up after 6 months, after a couple of years, I think that will be a crucial aspect as well.
So in a finance technology world, is creating a sandbox. Get it drawn up, test it out, doesn't work, do it again.
But not every company has that division to go do that, right? I just want to make it very clear. So if you don't have it, create it.
Yeah. So let's talk about talent, because with good and right talent, I think people will understand that the sandbox is important, what we have discussed earlier. Where do your find the challenges in getting the right talent? And once you have the right talent, what are some of the projects that you guys have done using the right team as well?
Yeah, so I think the primary concern when it comes from an IT standpoint is the team, might also be focusing more on the maintenance activities rather than, innovation or being more agile. So that could be one of the key concerns. So, I mean, the way I lead my team is also to ensure that, they're looking out for anything, any needs for automation or process efficiencies. So that's definitely one of the key part of it. And I think primarily that would be the key to drive the team through the innovation as well.
Are there any attributes in getting the right talent into your team?
Primarily, it's about how futuristic they are in their thinking as well. Because I think once you have a business case, exploring ideas would be another part. But while the business might not be able to think through that idea, I think it's just being able to think futuristic to see what could be the transformation over the next 2 years and what could be the strategy that we can build accordingly. I think that would be suggestible.
Miguel?
Yeah, I would totally agree. So I think it's about curiosity, right? But so one thing I would like to add is on the other side. So as a company, you need to keep these talented people busy, excited, looking forward for something, right? I've told people in my team or people who I've mentored that it's very, very likely that your next role doesn't exist, right? So the typical corporate career where, the structure is defined and it doesn't change for 20 years, especially in digital, doesn't happen, right? So sometimes you'll start needing a head of AI maybe in the future, right? And you can be that person, even though this role doesn't exist today, if you stay curious, if you bring value to the company, if you keep yourself busy. So I think it's equally important to keep this, like bringing curious people, but also give them the opportunity to explore.
Daniel, I think your answer will be a little bit different.
Very hard to find talent. It's extremely hard. But I like the idea. Stay curious, definitely. That's very hard to tell. It's easy to tell somebody, but it's very hard to make them do it. Right? So definitely when I actually interview for people in the team, I always try to gauge not in their current technical ability, but how they handle problem solving, how they react to changes. So that's probably but it's very hard. It's very hard to find people that matches everything. Yeah.
Talent development or talent acquisition, a lot of it is trial and error. I do agree. Yeah. I have 3.5 minutes left. I hope I can get another questions from the floor with regards to what we have discussed today. Gentlemen, with this lovely sunglasses on head.
Hi, I'm someone from public sector. So my question is like, we do have a challenge in the data transformations, like data sovereignty issues, because there are a lot of cloud offerings, there are a lot of AI solutions, a lot of open source availabilities. But we need to have a data governance and security, and that has to have a data residency within the Singapore for public sector to utilize. So as a CDO, what is your view on the data sovereignty issues, the governance and the interoperability issues? What is your view and recommendations?
Very big question.
Yeah.
When I deal with the government, at least in the Singapore government, I always ask these 3 questions. What do you classify their data? Private, intranet, internet, and public. So I always ask these 3 questions. If it's intranet, there's nothing I can do. It will only live in a private data center, that's all gated. If it's extranet, if it's extranet, it's ambiguous. You can debate it a little bit. But if it's internet, then maybe that's something that we can help them with, because there's a lot a capability for you to consume public cloud services, and you can mesh it a bit. So it's all about the data classification of that data. And data sovereignty is never going to be an issue if it's intranet, because it's always going to be under your lock and key and control. So it's the definition of the data and the classification. So it's really hard to address. I don't think anybody has figured it out yet. So, but it's ongoing. It's evolving as we speak.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? 1 minute left. Well, if not, I'd like to have concluding remarks from my panelists with regards to today's panel sessions on reimagining the digital playing fields from a data point of view, whether you're a CDO or you are working on data in order to engage your customers.
Yeah, I think for me, like I mentioned, I'm really thankful to have been here to exchange these thoughts with the colleagues from different industries as well, if not only pharma. Yeah, I think these are some of the challenges everyone's facing across the industries, and we just have to see how we can transform into the better solutions or better equipped solutions as well together.
So I would, if I have to kind of summarize or give a tip, I would say try to democratize data. I think if everybody across a business could have access to the data in the way that they need it, and visualize it the way they need it, tons of ideas and innovation will happen in an organization. But data is usually stored and hidden away or very hard to decipher. If you can democratize the access to data, I think very interesting things would happen.
Okay, for me, 3 things. People, where your people are, locations, and where your data resides. Go find out where it is first, right? And who you need to serve. That will determine what you go and do forward. That's my take.
With that, I thank my panelists here. If you have any other questions, please find them during the breaks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.